Welcome back to a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. I'm your host, Andrew Raffel. And listeners, viewers, we've got a special guest in the studio today, Kristin Steele. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm well. How are you?
We are doing very good. The Arizona weather is turning into our favor. So had couple a couple of cold weeks for us. I mean, I assume for you in Colorado, this is you got a sunny day out there as normal, but probably a little chillier.
Yeah, it was 1 degree when I woke up this morning, so
Woo!
happy for the sun.
1 degree. So does life just continue forward at 1 degree? No school's on and no problems, huh?
Yep.
Oh, I grew up in Cleveland, so I somewhat remember those days, but kind of block it all out. So, well, thanks for joining us. For listeners who've been part of our show for a while, Your Wealth and Beyond is about helping entrepreneurs become better leaders, finding purpose, building wealth. So who better to have on than Kristin, who's co-founded 2 companies and really has a passion for leadership and entrepreneurship. So I think we're going to have a great talk today. I always like to start off with a question is all entrepreneurs kind of find themselves into this chaotic world of entrepreneurship a little differently. How did you wind up as a business owner of 2 firms? Was that in your blood from childhood, or what led you down this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. My childhood, my early life influence, I think certainly let me believe that it wasn't so scary. My dad had done a few businesses when we were young. He never had quite the same approach and what we were doing as software and things that I've done now. But I saw it happen. So I think that gave a little inspiration. And then I think you get there and you find something that you just feel that urge that strongly about, and you have to answer that question for yourself. Is this something that I can just walk away from, or do I feel like this is the right opportunity and I need to go do this because I feel like it needs to be done?
And for you, was that first passion, was that the vineyard, the winery that you and the family created several years ago? Was that kind of your first foray into building a business?
I think admittedly that was probably a little bit more of my husband's drive and his answering that question for himself. And I was excited about that journey to go on that with him and the other couple that we bought that property with and started that business with, because maybe because I had that upbringing of not being terrified of it.
And so then as you got into the weeds there a little bit, even though it wasn't fully your passion project, but being there together as that team, and we'll talk a little bit about the technology companies that you built and in the industries and, the crafted, and the spirits and wine, et cetera. Did you start seeing that there was the technology wasn't there? And is that what led you working with, the ERP architects to look and say, we got to solve this issue?
Yes, absolutely. That parlayed very well into what I was doing in my career. We were looking at different industries that we could differentiate ourselves in, and I said, I'm seeing a great opportunity in the beverage alcohol industry. There's a lot of archaic technology, but nothing that's catering to the needs of those business owners with modern platforms.
So, like, what was some of those things? Like, so for those of us that aren't fully knowledgeable about what happens, from the back end, we get it, we go to the store, we go to the bar, we go to the restaurant, we drink it, but what we don't really realize, how does it get there? So what were some of those things that you saw that was that archaic technology, the fragmentation of it in regards to an industry that had a little bit of things that had to accomplish to get into the 21st century?
Sure. Well, for those that do or don't know what an ERP is, it's enterprise resource planning. So it's looking at all the aspects of your business and how are we bringing all of our, human or inventory, physical resources together. How are we bringing all of this together to manage and operate our business? And as an ERP consultant that I was at the time, we just as far as how those alcoholic beverage alcohol producers are managing those businesses. A lot of them were using either an old architecture of ERP that was kind of on premise, so it didn't allow the flexibility of these cloud systems and using things on your phone and some of those things that we take for granted today. Because you go back, I was doing all of this and first getting into it in 2013, and the cloud was still relatively new for a lot of people to adopt fully and just throw the whole thing in there. So there was that opportunity to continue educating in these industries that were relying on these older systems, and or you would not believe how many clipboards and pen and paper were still being utilized in these environments. So the ability to get all that data and capture the data when it's happening, rather than it being put on a clipboard and then somebody else transcribing it later. Obviously, all the issues that come along with people transcribing other people's notes and then trying to make business decisions, often with data that's pretty old. So, maybe days old by the time you're reacting to it. And with beverage alcohol, you're also fermenting, and there's, it's an active live thing that you're working with there. So you need those processes to be monitored very closely to produce a quality product that we all want to drink.
So is that where Doozy came first? Doozy Solutions was that, and you were one of there was 5 of you that co-founded Doozy Solutions?
Yeah, there were really 3 of us that co-founded, but we consider the 5 of us owners co-founders together, because we the other 2 that came along shortly thereafter were definitely critical, as we all took different pillars of the business and built it out. And there was one co-founder and I who sort of always were the visionaries and working on that together and building it together.
And so what, so Doozy Solutions, what is that for us as the listeners? What did you guys look at? We can talk a little bit deeper on the technologies that you started building, but what is Doozy Solutions?
Doozy was founded with the intention to be a solution builder, a solution provider, that we would look at industries that were underserved, starting with beverage alcohol, because we'd already identified a need in that industry, and take a fresh approach and say, how can we serve these, what we felt were underserved industries with their technology needs, and build out other solutions. So, while we have really focused and stayed primarily in the beverage alcohol industry, we also built out solution for meat processing, sort of if you think of the disassembly of an animal. Not a pretty process, but that, and then also within agriculture and farming, we have some IP there as well.
And so the founders of it, you guys had this vision. You had a trust in these other founders. You'd worked with them in the past, because a lot of entrepreneurs, as they're building a business, a lot of them are just go at it alone. They're solo entrepreneurs. They've got their own vision, and then they start building the company. So for you, you were able to bring in like-minded individuals that you already knew, had worked with in the past, and understood the world that you guys were going to be trying to build in?
Yes. So the original 3 of us had worked together in the prior environment, and there were changes that happened there that created this opportunity to say, well, we feel like this is a need and we want to go pursue it and build it. So we did that. And the other 2 that came along, one was more of a financial investor, but was able to be sort of an administrative operational support to the business. So that's where he became active in the business. And then the other was somebody we had worked with a little bit in the past, and we just knew, like you said, that he was a like-minded individual. And while we didn't have a lot of the work with experience per se, we at least had known him within our ecosystem and were able to gain comfort from that.
And so for you, what was the emotions like of leaving maybe the corporate type world where you had the salary and the stability? Was that a hard thing for you to grapple with as you made that leap? Because a lot of those entrepreneurs who have the vision that they think will work, but they get afraid of actually doing it. So let's talk about that emotional impact on you and how you're able to formulate to make this the right decision for you and the family.
That is a great question, and it is a really thoughtful process you have to go through in that moment to recognize that fear and acknowledge it, and also decide, do you have the strength both in yourself and, as you just touched on, your family? This is going to impact those in your life. So do you have the support of those loved ones that will be definitely needed to lean on in those tough times? And so for me, that was part of the process, was talking it through. And it was a tough thing in that when this opportunity arose, it was sort of we have to make a decision kind of in a week or so to just go or no go, because there was a big industry conference coming up, and we knew we either needed to go and be there and gain the interest, or wait a whole year. And we didn't want to wait a whole year, because then where's your momentum and all that? So it was a good forcing function to work through that and quickly decide, this is it. This is time. Let's go do it, and get that buy-in from the family, which luckily I have very supportive family for that decision.
And was Crafted ERP already tied in with it? So like Doozy was like, we had the corporate umbrella, and you already had the vision too for Crafted, and knowing that this is the piece that's missing in the industry, and that you were going to use the umbrella company to actually then build it.
Yes. And we definitely had that challenge of deciding, do you just name it after whatever the product is that you're building, or what is your vision for the company? And that's where we asked ourselves, we have a vision for something greater. And the word Doozy is in its origin not necessarily the negative tone that we use it with now a lot of times, but it's a playful name in that it's unique or one of a kind, but we use it so often as like, ooh, that was a doozy. So the consumer of our name, when they read it, can either interpret that as, I have a doozy of a problem and I would like their solution, or they see that we're providing unique or one of a kind solutions. So
Interesting. I always like hearing the backstory of where names came from, because obviously Crafted ERP, is what it is, right? But Doozy, I was actually going to ask on that, so thank you for clearing that up. Very
yeah.
cool. So in your industry, you look at, there's two components in the tech industry, and then also really in the beverage world, the alcohol beverage world. Very few females especially in the beverage. We actually had local in Phoenix. We had a guest on who she runs a brewery here in town. She's brewmaster and also has a brewery, and I think she said it's like maybe 5% at the most are women-owned breweries in the country, and I assume that's probably that stat range true for a lot in the beverage alcohol related, right?
Yes.
So as a female leader in two industries that have fewer than in some, what has that meant for you as you've helped build this company and make it successful, but then also sharing that passion as a female entrepreneur?
As a female going into, and I had come out of other tech industries where they were also male dominated industries. So, in some ways, I think if you have it in you, you don't necessarily stop and look around at that problem all the time. You're just powering forward. And that's a bit of how I am in my approach. At the same time, I definitely recognize that was a challenge, and I wanted to always be creating opportunities, and also I appreciated as I moved through former jobs as well, and then as we started this company, there were women that we hired that told me, I came here because I was really inspired by you being a woman. Even, in an ownership group of 5 people, 1 woman and 4 men. And here I'm, raising my ideas and my concerns in that different approach that women have to solve problem solving than men, and trying to create that opportunity and environment for other women to join our industry. And it's been sort of an honor when people have recognized that and shared that with me, that I was one of those deciding factors. And it is in the industry severely underrepresented. The women are, and it's been a challenge, and there's been countless panels, and it's a common theme on those panels when the women get up and speak, and they say, I wish we could stop having women in this industry, women in women challenges kind of conversations. I wish it was all just equal, and I think it's getting better. That being said, I think that mind shift comes from both sides of understanding that the other side, not necessarily men, but just that representative of what that industry kind of is used to needs time to change and work through that, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. And then how can we continue to provide just positive energy toward it as we approach things, and not come across as complaining or some of the things that come up with people having concerns about women's rights or feminism.
Yes. Yep. And so as you guys started, like you bootstrap it, is it where you self-funded, or did you have to take in investors as well, beyond the five of you that were the original investors and founders?
We were entirely self-funded, still are.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, and that takes a lot too, when you have, especially in the beginning, five mouths to feed, and built. So you guys had to not only, create two companies, you had to build the technology, which isn't cheap. And then you also had to, I assume, market it to get the message out there, right? So how did that work? How long did the technology take to create in the beginning stages there for crafted ERP? And then how do you get that message out to the people that need it but don't know who you are?
So we had the benefit that we were working with a platform that we were building on. So if you think of like an app for your phone, we weren't building the phone, but we were building the app to make the phone do the things that we need the phone to do. And so that's what we did, building Crafted, leveraging a platform called NetSuite. And by doing that, we were able to get to market a lot faster than somebody just building something entirely from scratch. That being said, there's always, you hear the story, we were building the plane while we were flying it, and that was very true for us as well. You get that minimum viable product, you get it out there, you start getting the feedback, and that's part of why that I mentioned that initial conference. We knew we needed to be there and get that feedback and get that plane in motion. So that was how, from the technology side, how we sort of got that started, and then getting our name out there. I think I have always had an interest in and studied different brands and stories and observing how things are done. And so I knew we just needed to be ever present. So how could we find the most affordable ways for us to be ever present? And that was showing up to the conferences and looking a lot bigger than we were. We were very scrappy, figuring out whatever way we could buy and sneak in chairs or all the things that they usually make you rent at these conferences for outrageous prices. And putting together our representation at the cheapest cost possible. And then also creative things like, we're lucky that we're based in Denver, Colorado, and the Great American Beer Festival is hosted here every year. And at that time in the industry, a lot of the owners saw that as a fun time. The people that we were selling to, the owners and the decision makers within the business, were enjoying coming out to that event and having that time to socialize with each other and make business deals, whatever. It was a good time for their vendors as well. So we set up an event right outside of that and said, we want to feed you before you go feed all the consumers that are coming to this event with your beer. So getting creative about things like that, where we threw this tailgate party in a parking lot. It looked like we were putting all this money into it, and they loved it, and it got our name out there in that kind of guerrilla style. But in reality, it was relatively cheap for us, again, to put it on. So it was really doing those scrappy, creative things to get our name out there, and just being shameless as well. I think, any entrepreneur will tell you that they had this just shameless side of them because they felt so passionate about what they were doing and wanted to bring it out there. So you just combine that and across, as we rolled out beer and then spirits and then wine, in terms of how we rolled out to those industries. So each time it was kind of a fresh approach, working with the associations, the big players that we knew, asking other vendors, hey, can you get us introductions? Just being scrappy.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to fake it till you make it.
Absolutely.
So who is your, so let's dig a little deeper into crafted ERP. So who's the I mean, obviously we know who the end user is, but let's drill down, like who is the end user? What does the technology do? And what is the value that you're bringing to them, to somebody that probably in some cases never even had technology like this in the past, or they did and it wasn't working the way that they thought it should? What does it actually do for me as a business owner in that industry?
Yeah, so the time for a business owner or operator to evaluate whether or not they should be considering is as they're either facing a ton of inefficiency and they're trying to figure out where it's coming from, and it's hard to look at, collect, and analyze that data, and or when you're trying to scale and grow your business, which a lot of us are, because that's ultimately we're trying to get out to a broader audience. And so that opportunity to reorganize your business and create process and flow and that data collection that then can be provided back to you in a useful manner. Those are all the times that you want to be looking at implementing systems or a system. And the reason why you would choose a solution like ours is that we provide everything from, taking the order and how that order flows through to the people who are going to process the order, to in beverage alcohol, there's that whole piece of how it actually gets made that you referenced earlier. And that is a really, elaborate process. It's very simple in some ways, but there's just so many intricate parts. And so you need to be anticipating how much you're going to need, because none of it's overnight. I mean, the fastest production is beer, and that's still, you need at least 3 weeks kind of for the fastest beers that can be made. You need at least 3 weeks of a heads up of when you need it. And that's assuming you have all the inventory on hand. So it's doing all of that planning for the materials that you're going to need and when it needs to be ready for those orders. And then also anticipating, working with your distributors or those that are buying from you. What do we think this next year is going to look like? Is it going to be a busy summer or not? You're totally making these guesses unless you have that data to inform and make educated guesses. And that's where having a system would help you do that. So it's just bringing all of that together, and then also all the accounting that goes with that. There's a lot of systems that will do just one piece. They'll do the order management and then pass it over, and then there's a production system, and then there's a different system that's doing all the accounting. And that's part of what we loved about the NetSuite platform and what we were doing with NetSuite as generalists at our prior life together was being able to provide that holistic view of the business and create those efficiencies and revisit processes and say, well, why are you taking all these sheets of paper and spending days, at the end of the month entering it in? What if the person who's creating that data could just collect that data and then it's all in there real time and you can report on it whenever you want? So it's bringing all of that together, and it's fairly complex. It's a lot different than creating a software because I want to be able to do something simple like take a picture on my phone, right? It was a very holistic. It is a very holistic solution, and our goal was to solve that and make it better, because there's all these brands out there struggling to keep up with the demand and the rise that was happening in the craft beer industry. And then shortly thereafter with, I don't know if you've heard, but there's been this whole movement in whiskey. Everybody wants to have whiskey all of a sudden, have their own labels, all that stuff. So, just doing all that planning and getting all that into a system where you can manage your business better and you can actually take a vacation. You don't have to be there. You could check in from, taking a trip down to Mexico or something like that.
And the technology, do you have to shift it when you're building it, when you started building it and moving downline to, from beer to then spirits and then to the wineries?
We took a fresh approach with each. Our intention was these are all, while they're very similar and they all have, fermentation and then packaging and all those pieces that are the same, they're all very different as well. So our intention was there's a lot of these businesses that are starting to dabble in more than one of these disciplines. How can we put together a solution that allows them to keep all of that in one system rather than running a wine system and a spirit system and then trying to combine those back into a different accounting system?
And then the beauty of your service offering, we've been on Salesforce CRM since 2010, and kind of I'm stuck, can't go anywhere, right? It's like the mafia, always have to pay. So I assume you're very similar. When somebody's on your platform and you're doing all the things that you mentioned, it's very hard for them to leave.
It is
Very
sticky.
sticky.
That was definitely, as a business owner, that's part of the appeal, to reduce churn and find opportunity. But you have to keep creating value as well, and that's something that I think some folks take for granted. It's something we've continued to look for other opportunities, and really over the last 2 years, where are the biggest challenges that we see coming for these guys, or that just still haven't been addressed, and how can we keep adding value for our customers that have trusted us with their business? Because it is, I mean, whether you call it the brain or the heart, it is a vital organ. So you can't just swap it out on a whim.
Yep, and that's why you guys have pivoted to the meat processing side of things as well, like something like with the inefficiencies that are in these old school industries.
We have not pursued continuing down that path because there was such opportunity in beverage alcohol to continue gaining that market share and providing more value if we continued our development efforts focused in that industry. But that's certainly one that we're keeping an eye on. There's pros and cons. You also have to be looking at who's in that industry and can they afford these systems, because technology isn't cheap, and even if you want it, there needs to be good consistency within that industry to keep us alive if we're going to go after it.
And how many employees do you now have underneath Doozy and Crafted?
I think we are between 40 and 50. I don't recall. I know we've just added a few people, so it's and I'm not in the day-to-day operations anymore. I've stepped back to the chairwoman seat, so I'm taking that little break for that sometimes you need as an entrepreneur to get in touch with yourself and your family again. But yeah, we're, I think, about 50.
But in the beginning, you were in the weeds and you were helping to shape and grow. So let's talk. So in that end, like what was, jumping in from being an employee of these, whether the tech industry or wherever your founders all came from, how did you lead? What was, and I know a lot of it's trial and error. There are books, but it's not until you're in the proverbial weeds until you figure out what your leadership style is. But as you guys started going from vision to actually having a company and having clients and having employees, I assume some were contracted if they were on the tech side, but what did you do to lead to shape the culture as the company was growing?
The big thing, I think, is, for me, I believe that as a leader, your role is to provide the inspiration and also to remove the obstacles. So I very much looked at the people that were coming on board, and when they had needs from me, if they were, I had one employee who was in my office constantly, and I was like, look, I want to help you. At the same time, I need to be able to get my things done. So let's find a way to make this work. And it became kind of a joke because he created this Google Doc and he would put stuff in it, and it was, being needy was the name of the doc. And so then it became like he would just tag people, whoever he needed help from, and then they would get to it when they could, and hit him up over chat. So I see that as removing those obstacles to let your team be as efficient and effective as they can in their role, and then how can you keep looking forward and providing that inspiration for them. And we obviously, as the entrepreneur, you're bearing a lot on your shoulders, and you have your hard days. And for me, those hard days, I would wake up and feel that dread or whatever was hitting me, and then I would think, how cool is it that these people trusted their careers in me? I need to get my butt out of bed and go keep performing for them and keep them going. So that's where I, like I said, believe in that sort of servant leadership style.
And did you each have different roles in growing the company on the leadership side? Like, did you looked at the five of you and said, okay, you're best suited for this, and somebody else is for that? Like, where did you fit into that picture as you guys grew this with 3 and then 5 of you guys?
I am really passionate about the customer experience. So I oversaw kind of building out the revenue function of how are we going to market? How are people seeing us and experiencing our brand? How are we selling to them? How are they experiencing that implementation process? Are we following up with them with those customer success intentions, and managing those relationships or encouraging the management of those relationships. That's very much where my passion lies. And as that translates inward to the business, I would lead our all hands and guide even the group of us. I tended to be the one that was sort of ushering us along toward these things that we were doing, because you need that person as well, and that keeping that central core of the culture that you mentioned just came naturally to me. That's something that I felt really comfortable and passionate about doing. So we all kind of played our different parts in how we managed the operations as things ebbed and flowed. But initially, each sort of had their pillars. So one of my co-founders was a developer, and one of my other co-founders was sort of the solution architect and the product oversight. And then of the other two, one of them when he came on, he took over all those professional services, and then the other one was helping out with back office and finance things.
And as you guys grew, you faced, obviously success brings challenges. What are, looking back, what does anything jump out of like, hey, this was one of the biggest challenges we face, and what advice would you give to the listeners who are, going to face the same, maybe different obstacles, but the same as we grow, we get bigger, face these challenges? What did you see? What did you guys utilize to overcome that?
I think there's two that come to mind when you ask that question. One is scaling and growing a business and hiring the right people is so challenging when you're in go mode, and you hit that those next three deals that all hit at the same time, and you have that, oh shit, we don't have enough people for this, or whatever type of momentum. And so it's that classic challenge of hiring the right people and knowing when to fail fast and move on when it's not the right fit. So that was something that we definitely fumbled our way through. And part of that was finding the right balance of that consultant implementation personality, and then also somebody who understood the industry. And once we had embraced sort of some industry folks, and once we kind of pivoted how we were looking at them and training them to be less focused on the product and just training them to be a good implementation consultant, the product stuff came naturally. And they're such incredible resources for our customers, but they're just such great people too. And they're so excited when they are saying, I've been brewing beer, or I've been making wine or whatever for all these years, and I'm a little burnt out on that, but I want to stay close to the industry. And we've given them that opportunity to make that pivot. And then they're really excited because now they have a way to bring all their energy and expertise and apply it in a new way to the business. And when they're on the calls, you can just hear they start talking shop, and if you're not living it day to day, you might be like, what were those words? What were they just talking about? But that was a challenge. But as we figured it out, it became a very rewarding aspect of the business. And then I forgot what my other one was, so maybe we just leave it with that.
There you go. Well, no, that was a great one. And so as you had these successful years, like in any business, it's always like, what did you do for me lately? Or what did you as the entrepreneur do? We had a great 17. It's like, how did you get yourself motivated and also your team motivated to make like that 2018 even better than 17? Because that's a lot what we face is that complacency. And it's like, oh, I got to do it all over again. What was some of the things that you learned along the way that was helpful in motivating the team?
Definitely keeping them aligned with the vision or the opportunity even. I found that when people started getting complacent, it was because they couldn't see themselves, like the picture of themselves in wherever we were headed, or maybe it was whatever future they wanted for themselves. They didn't understand if that was possible. So staying in touch with those employees and those valued team members, whether that was mine directly or somebody else on somebody else's team. If I had the water cooler talk with somebody and it wasn't somebody on my team, I would let one of my counterparts know, like, hey, I'm sensing something's off here, and making sure that that leadership's being provided and staying in touch that way. And then as a whole, for the whole organic flow of the business, We did, our all hands. We tried to get people together in person. We definitely are not a take ourselves too seriously type of culture. There's many job descriptions that say, must be a movie quote master and different funny things that have been incorporated into that. And I think keeping that true to your culture, like you read in the books, it really is really important. And when things got stressful, like you said, of like we're growing fast or we've got these new things, and those were the times that we said, we need to have like, it was hard during COVID, but doing like a Zoom happy hour or whatever the thing was to try to just get everybody to pause and reconnect. And it's that feeling of being part of the community and that team orientation that really I found every time we could do those things, it would re-inject that energy back in and get people feeling like they were part of that greater whole.
And with the pandemic, obviously it affected all businesses, but it'd be interesting to learn because in theory, people drank more than they did prior, right, for that period of time. So, I mean, I know there's that fear of the unknown, but did it end up for you guys and your clients? Was it not as bad as some industries because of that factor?
It had sort of a delayed impact because initially, as you touched on, that demand was incredible, and it became this, oh my gosh, how do we keep up? How do we get our product out faster? People were willing to drive over to their favorite brewery across town if the brewery was willing to find a way to open their garage and sell beer out their back door if the other means weren't available, right? Like people were finding a way to get it done. So everybody was flying through their inventory, bracing themselves, picking up production, all of that. And then as we moved into 21 and into 22, they had kind of carried that momentum forward, but the demand didn't stay that way. As people came out of the pandemic, there was a movement to cut back the, oh my God, I put on 20 pounds and I was drinking every day. Maybe that's not a good idea. There was kind of that rebound effect, and that is still being felt through the industry as people are still, I think, trying to normalize through that.
Yeah, and have you noticed that as a trend that you're starting to hear more and more, hey, I'm drinking less, and I know that the industry's so large that it's just not going to crumble. But I think more and more are pulling back from. At least we're seeing it out here, and a lot of friends that have in their 40s that have been drinking since they were in college or even before. It's like, okay, I don't need the 3 drinks anymore. I'm not going to order the wine like I used to. What's your feel on that? Is that a real trend that's affecting the bottom line for companies?
Certainly, the better for you movement is hitting everybody, and it's been talked about at these industry conferences. Always the keynote, it feels like the last couple years, is somebody putting up the stats of the younger age group that used to come out of college and just keep that party going has not been drinking as much in college and is not continuing the party. So that age group that used to be heavy consumers of maybe some of the lower priced products is hitting some of those producers. And then within the craft segment, and we're kind of on the high end of the craft segment, and some of those producers that play on both sides that are just mass bulk as well as have some craft brands or portfolio. Because again, you just have to have enough of a business and to need a system as robust as ours. But those categories are all facing the challenges of, say, wine. The boomers are not, there's, sad to say, the population there is dwindling, so they're not drinking as much. And then you have a lot of people that within some of the other wine age groups maybe have decided that they're more into these ready to drink cocktails because lifestyle wise people want the mobility that these ready to drink cocktails. So it's not necessarily that people are entirely not drinking. Some of it's just that they're changing how and when they consume, and so the industry's also trying to figure that out. And so it's that compounded problem of you've got this movement to be healthier, maybe drink less, then you also have this movement of people shifting their tastes, which always happens. There's always these surges of like, oh my God, gin's the latest hot drink, let's drink gin, and then it's whiskey, and then it's vodka again, and So it's just it's navigating through that, and everybody wants to ride the wave when they can. And if you're a smaller producer that rode one of those waves and then that trend is over, what do you do with your business? Have you planned for that? Have you been keeping an eye on where the trends were headed next so you could pivot?
Yeah, and I think tequila too has had its
Oh my gosh.
rise
If
over
you're
these
a
last few
celebrity,
years.
you better have a tequila brand.
Gotta have that. Gotta have it. Even though it's all, I think there's like one or two major manufacturers that are actually
Yes.
doing it. So you mentioned earlier that you've pulled back recently from the day to day. Was that tough for you to see the baby that you helped formulate, shape, grow, lead into an adult, and now you're stepping back and not in the weeds as much? What's that like?
It's been an adjustment for sure. It's been both a gift and a challenge. We were at a point in the business where we wanted to make some changes, and with my co-CEO and I, it's funny you just said my baby, because when he and I were at odds on an idea or whatever, people would joke like, "Oh, mom and dad are fighting again," and we didn't, when that felt like it was less productive than it used to be, we didn't want that to have a negative impact on the business. And for me, the timing it's a very dynamic decision and lots of other things that went into it, but the timing of how all that rolled out, part of my introspection was I was really excited about solving this problem for the industry and going and making an impact and providing something better. And we've done that. We have provided a better mousetrap for them, and those that choose to embrace, this solution that we've offered. And we have inspired a ton of, the best form of flattery is when people imitate. And we have had a ton of competition coming up. Some of our, I mentioned outdated competitors, outdated technologies. They were quickly copying some of our marketing tactics and things like that. So, that was great. We solved a lot of those challenges. And so for me personally, it felt like a good time to take that step back and reevaluate, what do I want to do next? Do I want to go start another business? Do I want to stay on the periphery here? Do I want to take one of our other IPs and chase that down? And so that's kind of the time I've been taking, is to reflect on that. And I believe that kind of a lot of these things happen for a reason, and there is that, higher power out there that's guiding us at times when we need it. And both my kids just kind of leveled up, so middle school and high school, and the mom Uber impact to my life the last few months since this change has been tremendous. And I was just saying, I don't know how I would be keeping up if I was still trying to work at the pace I was working up until Q4. So I feel like that's been a big gift to have this time and be able to still, be involved in the business. I just had lunch with my co-CEO yesterday. So, still actively engaged in providing ideas and insights and reflections, but have also this time to myself to figure out where I'm at and reacquaint myself with myself. That's the other thing, as being a servant leader and being an entrepreneur, is you just give so much of yourself. You have to really stop every once in a while and say, am I taking care of myself too?
Yeah. No, and I think, by you making that decision, as you said, it was a very difficult decision, but it's one that now, you're taking time to breathe, but also having the time to be with the family and be able to be there while they're there and they need you. And, that's the time you won't be able to get back. And, you look back in 10 years, and if you didn't do that, you're like, oh, I wish I would have. And, so many entrepreneurs, either they don't have the option to do that, or they're just so dialed in and addicted to the growth and to the company that sometimes they lose sight on what is the most important. And so that's some really good advice if an entrepreneur is feeling that and you're able to do it. Definitely take the time to make that right decision. But as you know, you can always, for you, be able to jump in and either get back in the weeds or go out there and build something else.
Right. And I think to the comment about don't feel that they can do that, I didn't feel I could do that. And yet I'm here doing it now. So it really has to become a question that you ask yourself as a forcing function. As much as we all think we're not replaceable, and there is kind of this newer movement of what's the founder mentality, and the founder mode is what it's called. There's a blog about it if you're curious. But as important as that is, there are ways to still contribute as a founder and provide that to the team that's going to carry that forward without you having to kill yourself to do it.
Yeah. And are you now being able to spend some time in helping maybe younger entrepreneurs and help shape them and providing some leadership guidance? Has that been something that's on the table for you?
It's absolutely on the table. I have only talked to a couple of people who are pondering, and I've been able to give them, here's some questions I would have asked myself back then, and give them that. And Colorado is such a great place for startups in that community. I mean, I participated, and next Friday is my next one, at Startup Ski Day, where you get to go ski with a bunch of other people that are like-minded around the startup community. So that's a fun way just to have conversations and share ideas, and people are just getting things off the ground. You say, oh, what stage are you at? Oh, yeah, I remember that. And some of them have done it before and some haven't, so.
Yeah, and in earlier times you wouldn't have had the time to do that. So that's great that you're able to make that time and make it happen. Well, this has been great. Any last bit of wisdom for the listeners as you've had, exceptional growth, you've had, the challenges along the way, but anything else that we could learn from before we let you go back into your, maybe it's 7 degrees now, so maybe it got a little warmer.
I think listen to yourself more than you do probably. And I have always sort of operated with a growth mindset and been curious, and that's both outward and learning new things and reading the books and countless podcasts, especially the entrepreneurs who tell all those stories, right? That's what helped carry me through. But also, I think I did a lot of that and didn't take the 5 minutes at the end of the episode to ponder what I just heard and see how I felt about it and see what I could take away from it. It was either like, ooh, that's a good idea, I need to go do that in my business, but not consider like, what were the other insights? Like, you're asking me all these great things about how I've handled this experience. Whoever listens, I hope they can take 5 minutes afterwards and say, where am I at with myself? And what from that, besides the tactics, can I go apply and make sure I'm still on the right track for me.
Yeah, great advice, because we're always just moving on to the next thing. It's like we have to take the pause and comprehend what you just heard and write it down or think it through concretely.
Yeah.
Which is hard in today's world when it's just everything's coming at you
Totally.
20 miles an hour. Well, this has been great. Show notes, we'll have ways we can connect with you on your LinkedIn, learn more about your company. What was the name of that blog that you had mentioned? The Founders blog?
If you search Founder Mode, it's a blog post. I don't remember where it's at, but it's the first thing that shows up when you Google it. So
we will find it, and it will be in the show notes. Well, Kristin, thanks for spending some time with myself and our audience on the Your Wealth and Beyond podcast. We are definitely looking forward to your next chapter and appreciate all you're doing for your industry and for helping other leaders. So continued success.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And listeners, stay tuned. We'll have a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond later in the month. Happy planning, everybody. We'll talk real soon.